That's great. Complicating things. Very good. Happy birthday.
I'm trying to figure out what I'm gonna do. I don't know that's right on the, you know.
Yeah.
That's what I want to do. I mean, the song and dance. Because ultimately, we're gonna need all. We want the.
Can I just plug and sit there?
So you two switched.
Was that?
For Wednesday Bible study, we have A, B, C, D.
Yeah. It's gonna get creative too.
Back there and. Many
The Lord be with you. Hello. Well, let us pray together. Creating and sustaining God, we thank you for the excitement that comes with Advent, the anticipation that comes with Advent, for the story we know so dear, and for the story that is continuing, and for the story that is yet to come. I pray in these beautiful moments we have great conversation and spend time with one another in a memorable and edifying way. And all God's people said, Amen. All right. Well, Josh is working for me at the moment. We're going to get our introductions out of the way. And all I need to know, and you can kind of, let's see, we have, how about this? Each table is going to be a discussion group, and then you guys in the back can be my fifth group. I want your name and your favorite Christmas cookie.
Ooh.
So my name is Colton Hedrick, and my favorite Christmas cookie are the ones that have the Hershey's Kiss place right on top of them. And as
Everybody's favorite.
right, so yeah, why don't we start here and we'll kind of go around it this way.
Okay, I'm Jim Henry. That was my favorite cookie. But if not, we used to make them that were chocolate chip cookies with a green Christmas tree on it. So it was chocolate chip with the glittery green stuff that's on the sugar cookie normally. My mother made those, so I remember the best.
My name is Carrie King, and my favorite cookie is a recipe from my mother that uses orange rind. And they're very good. Kind of like a shortbread with oranges.
Where do you get those oranges, Terry?
From the Rotary Club.
Hitting everybody up next year.
I'll share your
I'm with-
recipe. Yeah, I'll get it.
For years, that's been my favorite.
Well done, dear. Well done.
And who are you? Her husband.
Mr. King.
All right, let's go back here. Yeah.
Carly Young, my grandmother's molasses.
Sarah Hamster and the littles, I call them pecan sandies. They're golden powdered sugar and they're yummy, yummy, yum.
Natalie Day, I like all Christmas cookies as long as they don't include licorice. But my favorite are the ones that we make with our friends, usually on New Year's, because for Christmas, where we make them and then have all different flavors, icing and all the goodies and things like that.
My name is Emily Clark. My favorite ones from childhood were the ones where my mother had made layers and then the center was always filled with strawberry jam or raspberry.
Oh, that sounds just terrible.
Um,
All right, let's go straight back so we can keep our circular motion.
Favorite Christmas cookie?
Classic, yes.
Alex Moore, I don't know if it counts as a cookie, but the Hershey's Hugs between the two pretzels where you melt them and then. Yeah.
I'm Lindsay Moore. I also love sugar cookies with any frosting and sparkles and glittery decoration.
I'm Karen McElhaney, and my favorite is a cream cheese sugar cookie. It's got a spritz. You put the cookie crust, you make all sorts of various designs, and then it's kind of what each cookie is. But yeah, the crystal cake.
Let's go back.
I like any cookie as long as it's green.
Consistent. I like that. I like that. Yeah, we can go this way and snake back.
Green hobby, pecan tassies.
Boys, and I like one that's called Cranberry Booty Creek.
and very fruity.
New invention.
Jack
Boyd and nobody could just go on. There's all kinds. I like tree breaks, I love the ones that are just the cutouts of all of them, snowmen and trees, whatever. But they gotta, they're ice, they gotta be ice. Oh. The icing makes it.
Great. Excellent. Let's go to Judy right here.
I would have to vote for gingerbread for gingerbread.
My name is Caitlin Hedrick, and goodness, my family didn't make Christmas cookies really when we were growing up. But I really like a good chocolate chip cookie any time of year, all seasons.
I'm Betty Milburn and I'm with you. We just didn't do that stuff, but now I love the sugar cookies because I make them with my grandchildren and decorate them with my grandchildren.
Mine's not a cookie, but it was my mother's, she called it fruit cake, but it's made with mincemeat.
Oh, yeah, nice.
It's good.
Darlene Shigerick, and I call them sand tarts, but they may be the same thing.
Mexican.
My second favorite ever.
You didn't ask me about mine.
Well, I'm gonna forget all of your names.
About my
So
favorite.
sorry about that.
You didn't ask me about
Josh, what is your favorite?
Just so you know. Because I've been here 10 years, not a single one of you have ever asked.
Where did they ask you?
Oh, it's not breaking for what I got. Rum balls. A good rum ball since 2005. And that was including living in Kentucky. So the gauntlet has been laid.
Where you accept bourbon?
They're in balls.
Now we know.
You need them so good that when you put them in your mouth, you almost want to slap somebody. That's how good they are.
All right, we have one more cookie. Diane, what is your favorite holiday cookie?
I decorated cutout shaped sugar cookies.
Classic.
When I grew up, there was a bakery that made, you could have a green tree or I think it was a blue star, maybe it was a yellow snowman or something. Anyway, it was a unique in that the sugar was all mixed in with the icing. It was
Interesting.
very uniquely done. It wasn't just iced and then sugar.
So I have 5 things we need to do up front. First, who wants to be the bishop today? I need one person to be a bishop. Anybody? Emily, thank you. You're going to be the bishop, and I'm so excited. This one's a little bit violent.
There, this feels.
This feels. This feels strangely right. Okay, who wants this? Who wants? I mean, I'm here. Here we go.
It's heavy.
My son doesn't want me to have it either.
All right. The pen could be mightier than the sword. I need a fighter. I need a hope. Excellent. You're welcome.
It's real.
Okay, the last thing, somebody needs to wear this red cape for me. Who's gonna wear the red cape? Perfect. Thank you. All right, these are 4 influential characters that shape the history of Advent. And we're gonna learn about them as we start our class. You have permission to stop me at any time because I really like to talk.
And by the way, everybody, this is Colton.
Yeah. Hello.
And he is a seminary student. He's a member of our church. And he joined at the beginning of 2023. And we are glad that the Hedrick family have become a part of our community. And
Thank you, Doc. So I'm going to start with an analogy as a story. I grew up in rural Texas, so this is definitely the first city I've lived in. So our daily activities were like running around in the woods and fishing and doing stuff like that. And in that part of Central Texas, we fished in the springtime for what we called sand bass. Some people call them white bass. And in the springtime, they run up the rivers and they stop at whatever dam they get to, and that's where they spawn. Well, luckily, one of those dams was right behind my house.
Oh, wow.
So I had one of the best sand bass fishing spots growing up until I was 18 years old. And I don't fish as much anymore. I wish I did. The way I learned how to tie a fishing knot was through my father. And I later learned in my adult life that the knot he taught me was called an improved clinch knot. Now, I didn't know that, and knowing the name of it did not help me tie it better. But he sat me down and he said, I'm going to teach you how your grandfather taught me how to tie a fishing lure on. So for my entire childhood, when I needed to remember how to correctly tie that little kind of highlighter green spinner bait on the end of a line, I did not Google how to tie an improved clinch knot. I thought of my father and of his father teaching me how to do it. So because I was aware of the story that came before me through my father, up to that point, the clinch knot was not more powerful. It didn't keep my lure on better, but it did cling something on to me. It was not just utility. In those moments on the banks of the Navasota River, the story that was tied to that experience brought a lot of meaning. So in my limited but intimate experience with the church up to this point, I see room for improvement in how Christians think about their own stories in the body of Christ here on earth. To put it in simple terms, many congregations, I think, do church really well. But do they know why they're doing church? The object of this brief class is to look at God's story about us through the lens of Advent. Specifically, today in our first class, the history of Advent. Next Sunday, we're going to talk about the importance of Advent, or if we should continue it through history. And then the third Sunday is going to be my favorite. We're going to actually do the thing. There's an artist, one of my favorite, his name is Scott Erickson. 3 of these books are going to magically appear in the library as soon as the Postal Service drops them off here. This is an excellent devotional. It's called Honest Advent. And what Scott Erickson does is he takes really big Christian themes and presents them in what he calls new icons or modern iconography. And he has a devotional for every day, and 15 of those days is a modern icon to go along with that. But us in the Protestant church, we don't really mess with icons. We don't really know what that's about. It's a little bit scary. And through his art style, he makes that very beautiful. So on the 3rd week, we're going to learn what a fancy word for looking at icons called Visio Divina. And then we're going to set aside time with some of his art and actually do it. And then on the 24th, spoiler alert, all 15 of those icons are going to be printed very huge for you to experience on 4th Sunday of Advent with candlelight. That's it. Okay, so these are large brush strokes that we're going through today. If we work together really well, and all 4 of our characters, no one gets stabbed or anything, we're going to cover 1,700 years in one class. So, number 1, that's impossible, right? There's too much to go on. So things are obviously left out. This isn't like an extremely perfectly woven history of Advent, but there is some stuff worth mentioning to kind of give you a picture of what was going on. So let's start, now that we've talked about art a little bit, I want to get going with an early picture. This is one of the earliest visual art renderings of Jesus we have. This is on the wall of a catacomb, the catacomb of Calixtus in Rome. Now, at this early in the church, the catacombs were a place where they would go and worship. It was safe. It was underground. If they weren't in catacombs, they were in house churches. And what is something you notice about this depiction of Jesus? Just right off the bat, what do you see?
He's carrying something.
Yeah. So this is Christ the Lamb, the shepherd, right? Got a little water pail, kind of a young-looking guy, got some robes on with a lamb over his back, and you can kind of see on the bottom there's a couple more lambs there. Now, just 100 years later, in the same exact city, we move to this picture of Jesus.
Fully robed.
Yeah, what else? What other differences do you
He
see?
has the long hair and beard.
Mm-hmm. What's he sitting on?
A throne.
A throne.
And he's got a light around him.
Yeah, very fancy. He's a fancy boy. Yes, absolutely.
Looks like he's judging people.
Yes, this is the mosaic of Saint Pudenzina in Rome, also just around 100 years later. So who can tell me what shifted in the culture for Christians to move from painting Jesus as a shepherd to a king on a throne?
They became more dominant.
They became more dominant. Anything else?
Made it more royal.
More royal. Yeah. So we're going to go to our first helper here. Who's got the sword? Yes, excellent. Hold it up high. You are the Holy Roman Emperor Constantine. Everyone say hello, Constantine. Yes, very good. You can put it down just for safety. So, to put this extremely briefly, for better or worse, in the early 300s, this guy made Christianity the national religion of what would become the Holy, Roman, Empire. And again, for better or worse, church and state do this, and they stay that way for a very, very long time. In 313, he issued an edict, the Edict of Milan, and he not only said Christianity's legit, he said you should probably be part of a church. Not only that, we're going to double down and give reparations so you guys can build buildings. You don't have to meet in the catacombs anymore. So, 100 years later, the symbol of power in society starts to influence our depictions of Christ. that's a kind of an oversimplified version, but that's why instead of drawing Jesus in a cave underground, taking care of the flock, we've got mosaics in buildings of Jesus on the throne, because that power shift changed in the culture. So I'm going to set my timer for 3 minutes, and I want you to talk in your small groups. If you had one picture of Jesus you could draw, how would you draw Jesus? Go.
I love it. It's a tuxedo. I'm sure that,
I'm heavy. All of them. What's that?
He's one of them. God, Jesus. It's kind of like a 70s movement. So you keep it.
Bringing in our artistic ideas and cave paintings and mosaics, and I want, starting with the Holy Roman Emperor Constantine's group, just give me one of y'all's favorites that you discussed. How would you depict Jesus if you got one depiction?
So we're gonna go with shepherd.
Shepherd, all right, Team Shepherd.
With lots of different animals, not just sheep.
Wow, provocative. I like that. Yeah, all right, let's go to the back wall. What out of that group, what was y'all's favorite depiction of Jesus?
So to adding to their animal kingdom, we envisioned him with people, with children and surrounded by people.
Great, great. How about the Pope's group here?
My people.
Sure.
She's at the door.
Well, yeah, I'll see Jesus at the doors, he's knocking on the door.
Yeah, that's good. How about Diane's group over here on the corner? What do y'all got?
I have different answers, but I think we all generated toward shepherd.
Okay,
You agree?
Or helping Jesus.
Yeah, that's good. All right, last group. What
Two.
okay, how about you guys first?
Which,
Jesus with the children.
Jesus with the child and Jesus knocking at the door. So both are invitation pictures.
Yeah, it's good. I like that. All right. What about you guys?
Ours was a comforter.
Comforter.
Yeah. Welcome arms.
Creating
And then
space.
add to that.
Yeah.
That's great. I like that. All right. So thank you all for that. It's kind of difficult, right? If you have to pick just one, because there isn't one monolithic picture of Christ. There's all kinds of beautiful imagery we have, especially from the text. So Constantine, Holy Roman Emperor, thank you for getting it all together for us. With money and power comes great responsibility. So as a necessity to make the Holy Roman Empire function, a lot of organization started to happen, right? So it's not long until we get to Nicaea, the Creed of Nicaea, and it took about 300 years for the church. Now that it can talk to each other, it's not, in some cases, literally underground. What exactly do we believe? What is this exactly about? That's where we get the earliest creed, the Nicene Creed, from. So Constantine took the throne in 306. Just 30 years later, we're going to meet our next character, I think, maybe. Uh-oh. Yay, we got it. Okay. We're going to go to France. So we're going to go a little further west. And in 336, we're going to meet Saint Martin. Where's the red cloak? Okay, everyone say hello, Saint Martin. Saint Martin. Okay. So Saint Martin was born just right after Constantine took power, right? So it's they're walking everywhere. These are ancient people. It takes a long time for things to get started. So Saint Martin, he was born into a Roman military family, and he was going to follow in the footsteps of his father. But Christianity was in the beginning of exploding, and somewhere along the way, Saint Martin, spoiler, he's a saint, he heard the gospel. And on a military expedition somewhere in Gaul, I believe, he passed a poor beggar. And Saint Martin tore his cloak in half with his sword and clothed the beggar. It's okay. That very night, Saint Martin allegedly had a vision of Christ being the one he clothed with his cloak. And Christ turned to him in the vision and said, Martin, a mere catechumen, that means someone studying to be a Christian, a mere catechumen has clothed me. And when he woke up, the cloak was full again.
Oh,
yeah. So because of that experience, Saint Martin went to the front lines of the next battle, refusing to fight. Quote, I am Christ's soldier. I am not allowed to fight. He is the first recorded conscientious objector in the military. He's the patron saint of the poor, soldiers, conscientious objectors, tailors, and winemakers. I'm not sure on the wine, but he got winemakers. Yeah. So
it was France.
Yes. Yes. And that's a good, yeah. Gaul is France. France is Gaul back then. So he left the military, and in the mid 300s, he spent the rest of his life establishing the first monasteries in Gaul. So the monastic presence for the Western Catholic Church in modern day France is attributed to Saint Martin. They're all about Saint Martin. Now, that means shedding some power, right? The monks, they weren't running things. They were praying all day. They were waking up in the middle of the night to pray, but everybody loved Saint Martin. They wanted him to be a bishop. So they tricked him into coming into town to heal a sick person. And when he walked into the church, they turned the lights on or lit the candles or whatever. And surprise, it was his ordination ceremony. And they forced him to be ordained as their bishop. And St. Martin spent the rest of his life establishing a monastic flavor of Christianity in ancient Gaul. Okay, let's keep going. Let's see what we got. There you go. There's the quote. I am Christ's soldier. I'm not allowed to fight. Okay, so why is this important? Why are we talking about Saint Martin and we haven't talked about purple candles? Because this is an Advent class. Okay, and I'm moving fast. So if anybody's got anything, the French word, the ancient Gallic word for cape, capella, capellini, half cape, tiny cape. This is why we call chaplains chaplains. It comes from the cape because they took that cape. And kings for generations used it as their banner to march into war. And they would keep the cape in the war camp, sort of like its own little tabernacle. And they would build these chapels to hold the relics of the saints. That's where the word chapel kind of comes from. So the word a cappella just means in the place where Saint Martin's cape is held. Not necessarily singing. So in this ancient context, it's just the ancient Gallic way to say in the chapel, a cappella, because that's where the tiny cape is. So later, the music connection is that we didn't have instruments at that time. So it was just understood if music was going on in the chapel, a cappella, it was just voices. Yes?
Was the red cape a relic?
It was considered a relic. Kings swore their oaths in Gaul on the Cape of Saint Martin.
That was DK.
I'll let me know. I would love to know.
Can you find it on Google?
I don't know.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that today required saying nothing.
That's right. So again, why are we talking about Saint Martin? Well, he has a feast day, right? So what is yeah. That's better. Okay. So what is a feast day? Okay, so back in the early church, nobody was taking home a bulletin, nobody was taking home a cool book, because not many could read, right? Not only that, we don't even have the printing press yet. Things were scribed by hand. So how do you teach a room full of ancient Gallic people that you should take care of the poor? Well, with the story of Saint Martin. So in the church calendar, they added a feast day for the saint to take the opportunity to teach people about the virtue of taking care of the poor, or not being violent, or being able to resist the war of empires and rather go into the monastery to serve Christ. This is weird to us sometimes as Protestants because we don't do feast days as much. We love books and words and theology, and we're a product of the Reformation. This is 1,000 years before that. This is ancient. Yes.
And somewhat later, but churches were built and they were windows and things and stuff on the walls, and the story was within the building. I'm an architect.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
What a transition. I couldn't have done it better myself. Yes, so if you go to these places like France or even places here in America, on the stained glass, you might see people that are outside of the Bible. And that's to mirror image this concept of people being, like you just said, in the house of God with the cloud of witnesses, with the saints. We're doing the liturgy with everyone, right? So for ancient people, it would have been very normal and not weird to have readings that go along with the theme of Saint Martin. Okay,
so it also connects back to the first image in the cave.
Absolutely, yeah, we're doing the same thing. So let's get a little specific. We're going to mark the feast day of Saint Martin on our calendar, and even today in churches that celebrate this feast day, it is on November 11th, and it has been for a very, very long time.
And
Okay,
they give gifts on that day.
they do, yeah, and
Sort of like Christmas.
sort of like Christmas. We're getting there, and they would have said Martinmas, right? Because it's the Mass of Saint Martin, Martin's Mass. Any questions about Constantine and Saint Martin before we move on?
Our mother's maiden names are both Martin.
Wow.
You suppose they're related?
Maybe that's your family story. Wow. Wow.
Out your trunk and see if you got a red cape in there. Let me know.
No. All right, so everyone remember the 11th of November. What's next? Eureka, I mean Epiphany. Okay, so Epiphany is very old. It has its roots in Eastern Christianity, Greek Orthodox kind of stuff. The East celebrates and celebrated three things: the nativity, so the birth of Jesus, the arrival of the wise men, and Jesus's baptism on the same day, on January 6th. So the concept here is Christ has come, born. Christ has come to the Gentiles, people that are different. And then Christ has come to the world because Christ started his ministry after baptism. So for most of history, this is still we're already 300 or 400 years after Christ died. The church is combining these three things in the East, right? The concept of Christmas, Christ Mass, is not necessarily happening yet. But we have the nativity, the wise men, and the baptism all celebrated on January 6th. So let's mark our feast day on our calendar. I have a little light bulb for us all the way down here. Here's our new year, right? So we've got Martin Mass on the 11th in the West, and we've got Epiphany on the 6th. So do we still do Epiphany later?
Yes.
We do, exactly. Okay, so why don't you guys celebrate the Nativity on the 6th?
The nativity.
Wait, say that question again.
Yeah, why don't we celebrate the birth of Jesus on the 6th, like the Easter? I'm gonna tell you.
Up until COVID, the creche with Little Baby Jesus stays in the chancel through Epiphany.
That's right.
Most years prior to COVID, that's what we would do.
That's right. That's right. So what was the West doing? If the Eastern Church combined these three concepts, excuse me, on January 6th, what was the West doing, right? We left with St. Martin. So I will say this. I'm more concerned today with calendar dates than I am Christmas wreaths and candles and things like that. The hot topic is Christmas is a pagan holiday and blah, 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 blah. They're not talking about the calendar. They're talking about traditions that happen around Christmas time with like hanging of the greens and toys and all that kind of stuff. That's not really what this is. I'm talking about like ancient Roman Christian imperial calendar organization, right? So like, yes, Christmas has been celebrated for this long. It is not a new thing. The traditions that have become hitched on to Christmas, you could argue that that comes a little bit later from other parts of Europe or Germanic speaking language. Yes, question.
Well, the rulers for Christianity were in the East.
That's right. For a long time, they were. Correct. Yeah. And we're going to see this East and West tension kind of build up a little bit. But let's keep going. This is the second book I want to recommend to you. It's called Worship for the Whole People of God by Ruth Duck. It's one of my favorite liturgical theologians. She's great. She's brilliant. So the short answer is we don't know why we celebrate Christmas on the 25th. It just kind of happened. And liturgical scholars believe there are three theories to this. The first theory is that in the year 274, which is before Constantine, so while the church was still underground and not necessarily in power, in the year 274, Emperor Aurelian instated a brand new holiday on December 25th. And everybody in the empire had to worship the birthday of the victorious sun, which was the emperor. So people think sometimes in the West, the early Christians wanted to critique that and say, no, we will not worship the emperor. So you know what we're going to do on December 25th? We're going to celebrate the birthday of our victorious son over death. So that's a theory. The next theory comes from the Bible. Who has their Bible with them?
I have it in my phone.
Presbyterians. I need somebody to read Luke 1:36 for me. And we're going to get another theory on why December 25th is a thing. Luke chapter 1, verse 36.
Yeah.
Yeah, and whoever finds it first, just go for it.
We don't have good internet here, you know.
Right, Dave.
Yeah, the cave. Internet's concerning this building.
136.
136.
Even Elizabeth, your relative, is going to have a child in her old age. And she who was said to be unable to conceive is in her 6th month.
6th month. We have a timestamp for something that happens in the early gospel narrative. Here we go. This is quoting Ruth Doug. Another explanation follows the chronology in Luke 1:5-20. During the Jewish Feast of Tabernacles, which happens at the autumn equinox, when Zechariah is serving at the temple, an angel tells him that his wife Elizabeth will bear a child named John the Baptist. When the angel Gabriel tells Mary that she is pregnant with Jesus, Gabriel says that her cousin Elizabeth is already 6 months pregnant. It follows that the birth of Jesus is 9 months later. Therefore, Jesus was conceived on the spring equinox and born on the winter solstice. Convenient, kind of works out, right? So we can use that, right? That's a theory, right? Like they didn't have the calendar we have now, but that's an idea. That's a theory. Third theory, and then we're going to move on. Another theory adapts the Jewish tradition that patriarchs or kings or prophets were born and died on the same day. Not necessarily the same month, but in Jewish, like the Midrash and even some parts in the text, it's really popular if a spokesperson for God or a ruling person in the culture, if their life started and ended and it like numerically fit really well. You were born on the 25th of something and you died on the 25th of something. So the concept or theory is somehow one of these three options, a combination of the three, or maybe all three in various different ways, get us somehow to separate out the nativity on the 25th. And then the big overarching thing is like even later, the winter solstice was being celebrated in Northwestern and Northeastern Europe. Some people were like, hey, we're already partying. Let's move it. But you could argue, scholars argue that the choice to go to December 25th might be a little older than that. It could be older than just the European winter party stuff.
Well,
yes.
There was also a Roman holiday, it's called Saturnalia.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
Saturn that started on December 17th and went through like the 23rd.
23rd. Yes, like that's.
There was reason to party already there.
Yes, people were already cooking.
Yeah.
Making a Christmas cookie.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes. So, okay, let's keep going. Let's say, for all intents and purposes, since this is one class, everybody's cool with the 25th now. So I've got a little manger here, right, on the 25th. We've got St. Martin still on the 11th and Epiphany still on the 6th. I need somebody to count the days in between the Nativity and Epiphany.
I don't need to count. I know.
Then what is it?
Go ahead, Phoenix.
What?
It's the 12 days of Christmas. That's why we do this. Yes. So technically, according to the Christian calendar, we party for Christmas for 12 days because there are 12 days celebrating the birth of Christ before we got to talk about the wise men and the baptism. So that's where that comes from. So we're going to do another group discussion before we keep trudging through church history at an alarming rate. What is your decision and culture about where you put the wise men in your Christmas decorations? 3 minutes, go. Where do you put the wise men?
There's the ball.
It's very nice. At all. Wow.
Yeah, Wednesday morning.
That one for all the characters.
My daughter came in and took me around. Invite me over to buy about how much you're already going on.
And then they just, I'm not sure what I'm gonna get.
Yeah.
And the other. Free them.
All right, let's rein it back in. Okay, who sets their wise men right there at the nativity with baby Jesus? Yeah. Who puts the wise men in the attic or something?
It's a little far away, but when the wise men came, was Jesus in the manger? That's the
Yeah.
You think they kept that baby in the hospital that long?
Yes.
Okay, I have a friend, some of you know Bunny Cowan, because she does circle and Wednesday morning Bible study here. And she puts her wise men at the far end of the house, and she puts her manger up like in the living room by the tree. And every day she moves those wise men a little bit. So between Christmas and Epiphany, her home is such that she has an opening between her living room and dining room. So they're going along the sills between, you know, of the dining room and living room, and they do not get to her manger until on Epiphany.
I have a mishmash of a manger set, and a different one was being given to me, and I never got all the other pieces. So I have 6 wise men.
Oh, wow.
And I learned in another class, the number of wise men are named. And when we lived in our other house, the piano was big enough. I started putting all 6 out.
Nice.
Yeah, we don't know that there's 3.
They had assistants. They each had an assistant.
Well, we know there's 3 gifts, but we don't know how many brought.
Right.
Didn't it take 2 years for them to get there?
It would have taken a long time.
I've heard it took 2 years.
Long time. All right. Any other questions before we move on to our final 2 characters that are going to help us? Yes.
Would Jesus have been in the manger when those wise men came 12 days later?
I think that he would have been a toddler.
But he could have been.
I think it's 2 years.
I think it would have
He would
been.
have been 2 years by the time they come.
Been on the run.
We don't even have to have the wise men at all.
You could put him in the garage.
About wise men being Gentiles, and Gentiles came to worship. So I mean, it's very
To
significant.
acknowledge his kingship.
Yes, I think it's very significant that the wise men being in.
It is. The biblical writers chose to include that story soon after the birth. Yes, I think that's an intentional decision.
So the question though, that pivots us here is, which gospel?
It's true.
Milk.
Which gospel? And that, I mean, from a preacher standpoint, that's kind of the relevance there, right? Because there's shepherds in one, and then there's the wise men in the other. And conflating them is conflating 2 different theological purposes, which is also one of the reasons why you can hold out putting the wise men out in the creche, because otherwise you're conflating 2 different theological narrative stories. But which one was which and why?
They were wise shepherds.
Listen, they were wise.
Okay, we're gonna keep going. We got a lot more history to go through. So everyone say Emily, the most holy Bishop Perpetus of Tours. Hello. Yes. Hello. Okay, Bishop Perpetus. This is after Saint Martin is long dead. Saint Martin was the 3rd bishop. Perpetus is the 6th bishop, right? So this happens around 460. Bishop Perpetus provides us with evidence for Advent morphing into something. They wouldn't have called it Advent, but he instituted that there should be a fast from Saint Martin's Day to the Nativity. So in the monastic communities, if he was your bishop, he was telling the monks, you need to be in fasting and prayer. I believe it was on Wednesdays and Fridays from the Feast of Saint Martin, from Martin Mass to Christ's Mass, right? Which would have been, just guess, how many days? 40 days. Yeah. It works out. The math just works out. I think church fathers just liked calendars, in my opinion. So at this point, okay. The question here is like, okay, what was the church doing this? Was everyone doing this? Was it just the monastic communities? We have evidence that yes and no. It kind of morphed. This isn't a hard line sort of thing. Which yes.
During all of this, most of the people that, were not educated. So they're just kind of following.
That's very true. Yes, that's true. That's true. That's true.
So it's gotta be an emperor or some sort of church.
Yes, the clergy. The clergy were in on it for sure. We know that. We know that at least. Okay, so what do we know? What do we know at this point? What is this telling us about the history of Advent? We know that it took around 300 or more years for the birth to be celebrated apart from Epiphany, to move it, right? I would argue we celebrated the birth a long time, maybe for sure earlier than that. But it took a little while for the West to really solidify this choice to differentiate from the East. Now, that's Christmas, that's Christmas. What about Advent? It took the mid-400s, this is the earliest we have that we can find right now. Bishop Perpetus wrote, we have this, fast and pray, sort of like Lent, between St. Martin's and the celebration of the Nativity. So it's an organic process, but we know Perpetus probably got it off the ground. He was really, and think about it, it makes sense. If St. Martin instituted this monastic flavor of Christianity, Bishop Perpetus was probably honoring that spiritual practice of fasting and prayer and preparation, getting ready for Christ's Mass. All right, here we go. The most holy, the most wise, Pope Gregory the First. You mean Gregory the Great? Yes. Hello. Hello. So, wow, the hat's really, Holy Spirit, I guess. Yeah, so notice the years. Now we're getting a bit later. We're leaving the 400s, we're getting into the 500s and the 600s. So you've probably heard of Gregory the Great, Pope Gregory the Great, patron saint of musicians, singers, students, teachers. Okay, the music thing. Let's get that out of the way. What do you know about Gregory? Why is chant? Gregorian chant.
The beautiful mystery.
Did Gregory write any of that? Absolutely not. The reason the reason it's attributed to him is I always think Gregory is the patron saint of secretaries. Because he, up until this point, he is an all-star administrator. Pope Gregory puts things in order, writes things down. He's kind of a historian. So much so that he looks at the church musicians and he says, okay, cool. I love what you guys are doing. It's great. I need a copy. And they're like, oh my gosh, we have to write music down. So Gregorian chant, we think of it as ancient, they were doing music before that. The fact that it was written and cataloged, that's why it's of historical significance. And he didn't just do it with music, he did it with everything. So that means the church calendar. So he took what was already pretty much happening in the West with something between St. Martin Mass and Christ's Mass. And he says, all right, we're going to write down what we're doing during this time. We're going to give it some names. We're going to give it some instructions. And it's not 100% sure, it's a little bit debated, but most scholars agree that we can attribute the 4 weeks and preparation, the concept of Advent, getting ready for the advent of Christ, to Gregory, not because he invented it, but he took what was already happening from Martin to Perpetus, a couple hundred years later, now to, he's the Pope, right? Not just a bishop. So he's in charge of the whole shebang. And because he wrote this down and instituted it, all of the Roman Empire started to do it. So now, instead of this homegrown kind of thing in Gaul, the entire Roman Empire gets to experience some sort of preparation between St. Martin's Day and Christmas. So, any questions up until this point? Great, we're going to blaze through the next 1,000 years. Because on a large scale, in the West, and I hate saying this because it's an oversimplification. The early Middle Ages is like, for some people, the least exciting. Some people would say not much happened. That's too much of a simplification, but the patristics, what we've just talked about, the first 400 to 500 years, that's definitely exciting. We have a lot of writings, so that's where this is coming from. So we're going to jump. I don't want to jump all the way to the Reformation. We're going to go, let's see, how far are we going here? Oh, we're just reviewing that. Okay. Yeah, there you go. There's your Advent calendar. Now this looks right? This looks good. Okay. This is what the West is doing. Very on brand, Pope Saint Nicholas the First, thanks. 800 to 867 was his years. And he wrote a letter, we have a letter, to the Bulgarians. And he's talking to these Bulgarians who are newly converted, maybe whether they wanted to be or not, Christians, with instructions on how to carry themselves, how to think about their new place in Christianity when walking to battle during the preparation of St. Martin. So during what we would call Advent, and instructions to not hunt and kill anything 4 weeks before the Nativity is celebrated. So he doesn't use the word Advent, but in the years, in the 800s, we do have an idea that it was common that the church was doing some type of penance, some type of preparation, some type of fasting to abstain from certain meats. And I forget the exact thing, but it was something like, if you're in wartime, chill out for those 4 weeks. So yes.
Was this to keep all the priests and monks in order?
Could be. I think it was more honoring the monastic tradition, kind of set up by St. Martin. This preparation of the Nativity, the preparation of Christ's Mass. Let's see, I'm getting ahead of my notes here. Yeah, so some scholars would say, there it is, case closed. Pope St. Nicholas I said 4 weeks, there's Advent. Let's do another big jump. Clare of Assisi, 1194 to 1253. Have you heard of St. Francis?
Yeah.
They were homies. Yeah. In her rule, rule book for the people practicing in their what would later be known as the Franciscan tradition, in chapter 5, we have a reference to the Lent of St. Martin, quote, "No one may speak in the parlor during the Lent of St. Martin." There you go. We're making it to 1253 with some type of instruction or rule of being quiet, being prepared, no talking in the parlor. Okay, get ready because we're blazing a trail here. Okay, it's time for the Reformation. What do the reformers think about all these church calendars and saints? What do you think? What do you think they thought about it? Boo. Yeah, here we go. Luther, remember, he didn't want to leave. He just wanted to reform. Luther loved Christmas. He was about Christmas. John Calvin, I guess I'm going to quote his sermon from Christmas Day. "Now I see here today more people than I'm accustomed to having at this sermon." Oh, it gets better.
Yeah, I get that.
Why is that? It's Christmas Day. And who told you this? You poor beasts. It is a fitting euphemism for all of you who have come here today to honor Noel. Do you think you would be honoring God? Consider what sort of obedience to God your coming displays. In your mind, you're celebrating a holiday for God or turning today into one, but so much for that. In truth, as you have often been admonished, it is good to set aside one day out of the year in which we are reminded of all the good that has occurred because of Christ's birth in the world, and in which we hear the story of his birth retold, which will be done Sunday. But if you think that Jesus Christ was born today, you are crazy as wild beasts. For when you elevate, here we go. For when you elevate one day alone for the purpose of worshiping God, you have just turned it into an idol. True, you insist that you have done so for the honor of God, but it is more for the honor of the devil. Wow. So, okay. So I guess, because notice, John Calvin didn't say he wasn't gonna preach on the birth that day. He was preaching on the birth. He's critiquing this, this overemphasis and over celebrated, shiny pageantry, which it had become. I know, I can feel Josh back there. Yeah, okay, so
CEOs.
so for all intents and purposes, trying to end on time, we're gonna say Calvin was like, I guess. Who else? The original War on Christmas. Yeah, here we go.
You wouldn't like Target.
Oliver Cromwell was the Puritans. So think Puritans, 1600s. The Puritans under Oliver Cromwell. Let's see. Oh, good. We're on the last page, guys. They tried to abolish Christmas. Do you think it worked?
No.
Just kidding. So the law went into effect, and this is something interesting I want us to think about. The Puritan Parliament, people with money and power, wanted to stop doing it, and there was literally rioting in the streets. So it didn't work. So there's this difference in that the people were all about celebrating Christmas. It was this power struggle and structure of these Puritans, these reformers trying to figure out how are we different than the Catholic Church, or how are we different from the Anglican Church? Because if you only look at the meeting minutes and the laws that were passed and the guys with the cool white wigs or whatever, then you could say, yeah, they outlawed it. But you would be ignoring the fact that it didn't work, because the people were like, absolutely not. No, we will not celebrate Christ.
We're not taking away this.
Right, we're not taking away this one. Okay, here we go. We're gonna drive it home. This is a real document from 1659 from Massachusetts. So we're finally across the pond. For preventing disorders arising in several places within this jurisdiction by reason of some still observing such festivals, Christmas, as were superstitiously kept in other countries, to the great dishonor of God and offender of others. It is therefore ordained by this court that the authority thereof, that whatsoever shall be found observing any such day as Christmas or the like, Advent, either by forbearing of labor, feasting, or any other way, upon such accounts as aforesaid, every such person so offending shall pay for every such offense 5 shillings as to fine as a country.
Oh, wow.
So Massachusetts Puritans would fine you if you celebrated Advent or Christmas.
What's the year up there?
Now, when was that?
That would be 1659. 1659. Absolutely no Christmas. Straight to jail.
Well, they're burning witches at the same time.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
what it-
They're burning witches at the same
Pretty much. Yeah, you could draw that connection.
that's a little dire.
Yes. So we're seeing the extremes, right? We're seeing extremes of the spectrum. Only got a couple more slides and we're going to wrap up. Okay, we're going to just jump American history and go to Vatican II in the 1960s and what's called the liturgical renewal movement. So Vatican II, what was the big thing about Vatican II? Can anybody tell me?
They could read
Language. The Catholic Church finally said, let's quote, open this up to the world, end quote. The mass is now in the vernacular language of the people. So that's true, but they did a lot more at Vatican II. They beefed up the calendar, they beefed up services, they beefed up symbolism to try and really put their money where their mouth was and provide an intentional space for the Catholic Church to reclaim some of this liturgical tradition. So in the 1960s in the West, we're still kind of in the West here. Well, I say kind of, it is the West. Lengths are being gone to make this work again in a beautiful way. Cool. So we're Presbyterian, we're not Catholic. How did it get to us? Why are we sitting in this room in 2023? The liturgical renewal movement. And I'm going to quote an article here because it sums it up nice and I don't want to be late to lunch. The liturgical movement, a 19th and 20th century effort in Christian churches, which includes us, to restore the active and intelligent participation of the people in the liturgy, or official rites of our religion. The movement sought to make the liturgy, Advent, both more attuned to early Christian traditions and more relevant to modern Christian life. When was Hope Presbyterian Church established? 1975. In 1975, the liturgical renewal movement was running and gunning. So it was probably, I'm assuming here, maybe you could speak to this, Josh. It was no question that Advent would be celebrated at Hope Presbyterian Church because we have pendulums swung from Massachusetts. Now, maybe pendulum's not good, but a response to that would be this liturgical renewal movement. Okay, I'm going to skip our last question because we kind of already answered it. That's it for today. That's the history of Advent in 45 minutes or whatever we did. So I think, yeah, this is it. Okay. Any questions? And let's just review. So this will be 2 minutes. Constantine, sword. Yes, thank you. Power, money, which necessitated organization. That organization got some random Roman soldier to hear the gospel, the first conscientious objector, now the bishop. That service of the poor was honored for generations by people like Bishop Perpetus that instituted a fast. 200 years more of empire got Pope Gregory on board, and he said, hey, I really like this. We're already kind of doing it. Let's make the whole Roman Empire doing it. For today's class, history kind of went dark, but we have a couple letters of people referencing a fast or maybe silence before Christmas. We get to the Reformation, and the Puritans and the Reformers were like, I kind of hate this, or all out straight to jail. We skipped American church history because not today. We get to Vatican II, and there's a need. Hey, what if we brought some of this back and enriched it and made this more accessible? And then finally, that went to the Protestants also when this church was founded. Any questions, comments, or concerns before we head out today? Yes.
So we were talking at supper club tonight. I grew up Southern Baptist.
Me too.
This Advent thing, totally foreign to me. I mean, it was not a thing. We had the Christmas season and stuff, but I didn't know what Advent was until I joined the Presbyterian Church. I think I kind of heard of it. So my question is, what other, and this may get into your history of the American church, of denominations other than Southern Baptist, and I may be Methodist or somebody, don't really make a deal out of Advent. I mean, we didn't have purple, we didn't have candles. It was, I mean, we had Christmas season and stuff,
No colors.
but well, and no candles and no mention of that word. It's kind of like we had, we'd have the Lord's Supper twice a year. So I'm just wondering, from an American church history, am I doomed since I didn't?
So I think one thing I'd note in your slide, maybe add another slide, would be the birth of the liturgical calendar in the midst of all of this, where you have the defined seasons and the colors and the themes. Because ultimately what the liturgical calendar does, and this, a lot of Baptist, charismatic, non-denominational, Pentecostal churches do not follow the liturgical calendar, in which we do. And what I think makes it an invaluable resource, a terrific resource for the church is a remarkable tool that tells the story of God annually, through cyclically, right? So from what we call the day, which is the beginning of our liturgical year, Advent 1, all the way through birth and resurrection, or birth through death and resurrection, through the ministry of Jesus Christ, coming back around towards the reign of Christ. And so part of what that tool, the liturgical calendar, being a tool that walks us through 12 months of theology, doctrine, disciplines, and teachings, and then we rinse, repeat, recycle, we do it again, is a reinforcement of two things. One, that at the beginning and the end, right, that Christ, God has broken into this world, has already come into this world. And we conclude the liturgical year with the promise and the knowledge that in Christ, God reigns forever. When Christ comes again, will come again to reign forever, which we did last weekend on the Reign of Christ Sunday, which was the end of our liturgical calendar year. So I think that if we were to look at a slide of the birth of, and I don't know the years juxtaposed to the liturgical renewal movement, I think you would see it as a way in which it's an apostolic tool, a Christian education tool, a liturgical tool for the ordering of our communities. But when you look at Baptist, not Pentecostal, non-denominational, charismatic, these are a very different type of congregational formed of churches that a bit more independent in that regard. And so that connectionalism, unlike Episcopalian, Lutheran, Methodist, Presbyterian, Catholic, Anglican, which are connectional as a body for the whole of the world, right? There is a coalescing, a bringing together of the movement of the people of God in unison. So all those that I just mentioned, especially the Protestant ones, Episcopalian, Methodist, Lutheran, Presbyterian, Disciples of Christ, those major denominational ones, that is absolutely one thing that binds us together, apart from our theological doctrinal differences. I don't know if I answered that or not.
Well, you did, because it just always, it just never was a thing. And, and I know we're not from the, mother church, so to speak, that everything came from, and the Baptists weren't formed until later on and stuff. But I was you've answered it as to why it's not a thing. And that's why I was wondering, why are they ignoring this? Because it's just not part of it.
Well, I think that going back to the Puritanism, right? So when you're looking at the Anabaptist movement, Puritans into the Anabaptist movement in early church history, I think that the statement that Colton made about the Advent and these days, or even John Calvin, right? Even strong Calvinists would have, like real deal hardcore Calvinists would have some issues with the special Sundays, because it leads to idolatry. It leads to your view being stunted to the present instead of the beyond. And so I think you do begin to see from the Puritans into the Anabaptist movement, into the early church history in the United States, this idea of disassociating from these things that the capital C church, the mother church, would have implemented. And how do we distinguish from that? Does that seem fair?
Absolutely. Thank you for that addition. Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
What time period did they start this liturgical calendar?
Well, that's what I don't have the off the top of my head, but I wouldn't be too surprised that in the 20th century is when we begin to have the formalized liturgical calendar, and also the birth of the revised common lectionary, or the common lectionary, which is another whole lesson for another.
Yeah. Well, thank you for your time. Yes. Thank you to our church history characters. Yeah. Thank you. I'll bless you. Go into Advent, and may it be in your midst. Have a beautiful purple time and have a good lunch. Thank you. Adios. That's fine.
That's great. I thought
I don't think they do a lot of